Welcome to our presentation, APQC Supply Chain Research Recap, where we look at the highlights from 2025. Thank you for joining us today. I'm Marisa Brown, Senior Principal Research Lead for Supply Chain Management at APQC. And I look forward to sharing some insights and a couple of highlights from some of the research that we completed this year. As far as our agenda goes, we'll start with an overview of supply chain at APQC to set the context for what I'm going to share. And then I'll touch on highlights from some of our projects with links to the content and the collections so you can learn more. I've picked a few things from our 2025 priorities and challenges research, our look into supply chain planning. From a technology perspective, we can't skip AI and cybersecurity. And then we'll talk about resilience and sustainability and wrap up with some insights into some of our core metrics related content. I'll also give you a look forward as to what's coming in terms of some research topics and ways that we can connect so you can share your thoughts with me about what you'd like to see us cover. So as I mentioned, I'm going to start with a quick overview, and I've given you a few key links. First, to our expertise page, where you can learn more about what we are doing in supply chain, and then our research agenda, which has completed current upcoming research, not just in supply chain, but across the center. And then our blog posts, which are an informal entry into our APQC insights. When we talk about research at APQC for supply chain, we cover four primary areas: supply chain planning, sourcing and procurement, logistics and inventory management, and manufacturing. But we also include in our focus innovation and product and service development, because those are key to success in supply chain as well. So I invite you to check out our research. You can use the Now in the resource library. It's a cheat sheet, if you will, of recently published content. We update that twice a year. I've included a link for you to search, browse, or read content on supply chain in our resource library. You can get to the resource library from our webpage by going to the top menu and selecting resources, and it's the first one on there. It says resource library. So we do a lot of projects every year, and each one includes different audiences and different respondents, but we always go for a globally diverse cross-industry set of participants in a variety of supply chain roles, depending on the topic. Our research incorporates a mix of contemporary, of the moment hot topics, and also evergreen issues that are always of interest in supply chain. So as I mentioned, I picked a few projects to cover today, and I'm going to start with our 2025 supply chain priorities and challenges research. We concluded our 11th annual project this year, and we actually have the 12th annual one in the field right now. We'll be reporting in early 2026 on the new results. And we looked across multiple industries and regions, and I've included links to our white paper, as well as the cross-industry report here on the slide. And also on many of these, I include a link to the collection, so you can see all of the related resources that we've published. But really what we want to do every year is understand organizations' supply chain experience, their expectations, and anticipated trends. So two pieces that I picked out for today to share are: first, where did organizations say that they're placing their bets for 2025 in terms of supply chain? And we see that they plan to invest resources, innovation, and hiring. The most common area is in sourcing and procurement, and that is a shift. Supply chain planning had been the top area of focus since 2019. But what I think we're seeing now is a reflection of the ongoing turmoil and chaos that supply chains are facing globally, and the really renewed focus on understanding your suppliers and where are you sourcing from and who are you sourcing from. And that's why procurement moved into the top spot, followed by logistics, because getting goods to market from the raw material all the way through the supply chain has been an interesting challenge this year. So I think that planning is still important, very close in the third spot there. And I don't want anyone to think it's not important. In fact, we dug into that, and I'll share some of our supply chain planning insights from this year. On the right side of the screen are those trends, developments, innovations that people think will have a major impact on supply chain over the next 3 years. And we saw some notable shifts in the order of these trends relative to previous years. Process standardization moved to the top of the list for the first time in more than a decade. And I think it's, again, a reflection of the fact that many organizations are realizing they need to rebuild their foundation of processes so that they can better respond to all the disruptions. Because solid processes then serve as the basis upon which you can automate. You can improve, document, and standardize your processes first, and then it makes it easier to layer on top of that the automation that everyone's undertaking. Given the geopolitical conflicts of this past year, whether it's leadership globally, maritime trade routes that are impacted, tariffs, all those things, it's really no surprise to see that global trade and geopolitical risks moved up into second place. And we did see big data and advanced analytics, which had been at the top of the list for the past 3 years, move down into the fourth spot. But merging technologies and digitization, while dropping into the third spot, doesn't mean it's not important. It's still critical. Almost half, 49%, still think it'll be a major impact. Rounding out the top 6 anticipated trends, talent and labor issues. This is on the rise and will likely continue as we add more automation and people really wonder what's left for us, what are skills and competencies, what's the future for talent in supply chain. And ESG factors, sustainability continues to be something that goes in and out of the news, but from an environmental perspective especially, continues to be something supply chains report on and are investing in and focusing on. So I mentioned that we looked at supply chain planning this year. We took 2 major tacks. The first was looking at talent and skills needed for future success. And the second was the benchmarks, practices, and performance drivers. On the talent front, we recognize that planners are increasingly expected to take on an evolving role that requires them to manage complex cross-functional processes, drive automation, and build more agile supply chains. And so therefore the competencies that they need are changing. And we wanted to know what are the most critical skills and how are organizations doing when it comes to preparing their folks for those skills needed in the future, and where are they falling short. And again, links to all the relevant content are on the slide for you. But what we found is that the top skills are a mix of deep work skills, those that require focusing without distraction on complex, cognitively demanding tasks. And that's a deep work was coined by Cal Newport. But we also see social skills like communication, both oral and written, and technical or job-specific skills, demand planning and forecasting. All are recognized as part of the top 10 most important skills. All 3 kinds of skills are needed for the future. And what's interesting is on the right side of your screen, bottom line, we found that organizations are not adequately developing the skills that are most critical for the future. The gap between how important this skill is and their success in terms of being very or extremely effective in developing that skill. That's what the gap is showing. And you can see these are not small gaps. There is a sizable gap. And organizations really need to mind those gaps and get better at helping their employees develop the most critical skills. And in our report, we talk about what's the most effective ways to close those gaps. Also in supply chain planning, we released an all-new Blueprint for Success. And in our Blueprint for Success reports, we start with the process, we look at the key benchmarks and KPIs for that process, and then what are the performance drivers? What are those things that organizations are doing that helps them get better results on these important measures? So that Blueprint for Success is available to our members, as well as practices reports. And benchmarking is really more than just the numbers. The numbers let you see where your gaps are, but what practices do is help you figure out how to close those gaps. And we have some new supply chain planning practices reports in areas like strategy and culture, data and process management, as well as technology and visibility in planning. All of those are in the resource library. So now shifting from planning to technology related topics. As I mentioned, AI and cybersecurity, AI is everywhere. If you want to, but we want to get behind the hype in the headlines and really look at what are the trends in terms of where organizations are about in terms of adopting AI, what are the use cases for it, what are the benefits they're getting from it. And so here I've given you some critical links. We also looked at technology strategy and decision making trends in supply chain. And one little spoiler alert, when we asked about procurement and the use cases there, we asked those organizations that have already adopted AI, what benefits are you getting? And the top two are improved data quality and improved decision making. So who wouldn't want that for their organization? So you can learn more about that in our article there. Shifting to cybersecurity. And if I had to guess, I would say almost everyone listening to me right now has some kind of digital transformation underway in supply chain. If you don't, you're an outlier. Not a problem. Maybe you've already gone through it. But what we see is that supply chains today are relying heavily on digital technology to support the interconnected global networks that we have with suppliers, logistics providers, your customers, all your other stakeholders, your ecosystem. But as great as all these connected devices and smart networks are, they're also vulnerable. And we've seen increasingly that if a supplier gets hacked, that hack can affect your organization and your ability to serve your customers. So we did some research to get insights into these vulnerabilities and how are organizations mitigating cyber risks? What are some of the key benchmarks in this space in terms of response time and so forth? But one point I found very concerning was just how lax many organizations are when it comes to planning and preparedness for a cyber attack. So the chart on your screen shows that we found that almost a third of the organizations in our research, and we had 2,500 organizations here, almost a third of them are not even considering having robust operational technology endpoint security measures. And a quarter don't have any plans in place for how to respond if a cyber attack happens. And I don't know if these companies are just playing the odds and hoping that nothing happens to them, but hope is not a method. Hope is not an effective strategy. And unfortunately, it's hard to see what else is going on in these organizations, but that is a risk that we can't afford to take. So our collection provides some more guidance on that. Now, resilience. That's like the key word. If I had to pick a word for the year, as disruptions continue to test supply chains and the systems and the data and the decisions that connect them, resilience is where it's all at. Sustainability, as I mentioned, also continues to be something supply chains are looking at. In our featured white paper on resilience, we include data and analysis from APQC's cross-industry research, but also practical actions that you can take to improve resilience and examples of companies putting resilience strategies into practice. And we touch on resilience in sourcing and procurement, manufacturing, logistics, as well as planning. And speaking of sourcing, on the right-hand side, we asked organizations how familiar they are with their suppliers' business continuity plans. And I'm hoping that you're not in the bottom 5% that don't have a clue. But we found that only 36% of organizations are collecting their suppliers' business continuity plans, performing mitigations where needed, and continuously improving this process with a feedback loop. And that's critical because, like I said, your supplier's success can drive your success. And when it comes to ESG, we collected data from more than 2,000 organizations on this topic, and we looked at the E, the S, and the G. The E, environmental, is where a lot of the interest is in supply chains. And we really took a look at how are organizations doing when it comes to reporting on ESG and also making decisions and incorporating ESG in those decisions and budgets even. And in this first article mentioned on the sustainability paradox, high stakes, low spend, we find that sustainability can be considered a billion-dollar buzzword with a budget problem. Many organizations say sustainability is vital and it's vitally important to their business, but their budgetary priorities say otherwise. So we're seeing good news, a large number of departments incorporating environmental sustainability in their internal decision making. However, fewer than a third of strategic decisions are actually incorporating a sustainability impact assessment. That's the metric on the screen right now. So, again, opportunities to improve exist, and we have a lot of research available on how to do that. Core related metrics content. So, this is content that is evergreen, that is updated regularly. And if you look in the resource library, you'll often find collections that usually start with the cross industry piece and then have industry specific reports alphabetical by industry name. But this is where you'll find key benchmarks and you'll find tune-ups and information on picking the measures. And basically what we do is we study in our core areas, the 4 pieces of supply chain as well as product development, key benchmarks, which are curated lists of KPIs because APQC collects a lot of data and information. Part of what my role is to help curate that for you so that you don't have to look at all of it. We say these are the measures that can best help you balance cost, cycle time, productivity, and efficiency. And we'll include in these key benchmarks the median metric value. APQC industry members can go check out these measures in the Benchmarks on Demand portal and get the 25th percentile and the 75th percentile as well as the median to be able to get more information and insights. In addition to key metrics and benchmarks, we also create tune-up diagnostics, and these come in 2 forms. The interactive ones, where we take the highest level KPIs, maybe 4 or 5 in an area, and in Excel, we create a quick little way for you to get red, yellow, green indicators when you enter your own data to show you whether you're in the top quartile, the bottom quartile, or somewhere in the middle. We also have these tune-ups in an explanatory version that have the same set of metrics, but explain each one of them and answer the question, so what? Why do you want to be in the green or the best quartile? And we also include tips and suggestions for improvement. And then we have content on how to pick the right measures. And these are key considerations when you're deciding on which KPIs you want to use, how to consider them in an ongoing basis. And we also have content on understanding the processes in these key parts of supply chain, which is essentially APQC's process classification framework in simple English with bullet points. And then I mentioned our practices reports already. And they're not really metrics, but I wanted to include them here anyway, because these really help you understand how to close the gap in relation to your structure, centralized versus decentralized. How do you compare technology practices, other key practices, often split by topics to make it easier to digest? So that's just some of the highlights from 2025. We did a lot more research this year, and it's all available and for our members in the resource library. And where we are going from here for the end of this year and then early 2026. So we currently are fielding our 2026 supply chain priorities and challenges survey. That research will come out in the very beginning of 2026 with cross-industry information as well as industry reports and a white paper and a webinar kind of talking about where organizations investing for 2026 in their supply chains. Stay tuned for that. We also are releasing a getting started guide for AI in supply chain. As I talked to many of our members, which is also part of what I do here at APQC, I kept hearing a lot about we don't know how to really get going on AI in a strategic way. So we talked to a number of senior leaders in organizations across the world that have already implemented AI and have lessons learned. And we put all that together, and early next year, you'll find our Getting Started guide coming out. We also delved a little more into supply chain planning performance drivers, and those will be coming out, as well as we're going to tackle procure to pay. It's the number one end-to-end process that I get asked about, and we have some fresh new data, as well as some insights and guidance on how to better structure procure to pay and what can you do to get the best results there. We're going to release some more information on cybersecurity because that's not going away as a concern for supply chains. Supply chain analytics and data management, content coming there, as well as digital supply chain. We're going to tackle that topic head on next year and release some new information on product development. As devices are increasingly smart and connected, that has implications for how they're designed and developed and brought to market. So we want to take a look at that as well. That's not a comprehensive list, though, so please reach out to me and let me know what you would like to see us cover next year and beyond. I'm happy to have a voice of member call with you. Feel free to reach out to my colleague Danielle. Her email is on the screen. She can help set that up, or you can reach out to me directly. And I invite you to take a look at our online research agenda. It has more than just supply chain, it has all of APQC's research there. And you can always check out my column in Supply Chain Management Review. In every issue, I take a look at benchmarks that are of interest to the supply chain community. So please connect. Let's stay in touch on social media. And also, please, I encourage you, if you don't already, to follow APQC so that you can stay engaged and get the latest updates. Thank you, everyone, for joining, and I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day.